The year is 1347, and you awaken not in your warm bed, not in your climate-controlled room with running water, electricity, and a stocked kitchen, but on a bed of straw. In a smoke-darkened hut, the air thick with the smell of damp earth, animal, dung, and the sour tang of sweat that never quite washes away. You share the space not only with your family, but with the chickens scratching in the corner and a pig rooting in last night's scraps. Privacy is not a word that exists in your world. The cold bites through cracks in the walls, and if it rains, the thatched roof will drip. This is medieval England, sometime between 1066 and 1485, and the comforts you know are gone. No toothpaste, no medicine, no showers, no phones, no internet, no escape. Just survival. So let me ask you, could you survive here? Imagine this. Today, you complain when your Wi-Fi lags for 30 seconds. In medieval England, you might walk 3 miles barefoot, just to fetch water, only to find the stream fouled with animal waste. Your bathroom is a trench dug in the earth, buzzing with flies. You rise with the sun, not an alarm clock, and collapse into sleep not when you feel tired, but when the day's labor finally wrings every drop of strength from your body. Every meal is nearly the same stale bread, thin pottage, and ale so weak it barely tastes like beer. Hunger is your constant companion, gnawing at you through the winter months when food runs low and spring harvest feels an eternity away. And here's the truth. Most modern people would not last a week. But before we answer whether you could, let's take a journey through one day in the life of a peasant family in a small English village. Their struggles, their fears, their fleeting joys. Through them, you'll see what survival really meant. Picture the village, a cluster of Waterlandorp cottages huddled together like children seeking warmth. Smoke curls lazily from holes in the roofs. A dirt path winds between them, churned into mud by cartwheels and hooves. In the center stands the church, its rough stone walls towering above the huts. A constant reminder of God's watchful eye and the priest's authority. Beyond the cottages stretch the open fields, long strips of farmland divided under the Lord's control. Every person you see belongs to someone else. The land is not yours. The grain you grow is not yours. Your life, your labor, even your faith, everything bends toward the Lord in his manor and the church in its stone halls. If you are lucky, you live to see 40. If you are unlucky, disease, accident, or childbirth carries you away sooner. Death is everywhere, in the cough of a child, in the swollen belly of the malnourished, in the swollen glands of plague. Let us walk inside one of these cottages. Here lies Thomas, a peasant farmer in his mid-30s. His wife Agnes tends the morning. Fire with careful blows of breath, coaxing life back into the embers. Around them, 3 children stir. The eldest, Robert, no more than 12, already bears the hardened look of someone who works like a grown man. The younger 2, Alice and John, rubbed their eyes with grubby fists as the chickens clucked nearby. The straw on which they slept is damp. Fleas nip at their ankles, yet for them, this is normal. Comfort is not expected. Survival is the only goal. This family will be our eyes, our guides through the medieval world. Now pause. Think about your own morning routine. You wake to an alarm, check your phone, maybe brew coffee or pour cereal. You brush your teeth with minty paste, rinse with clean water straight from the tap. Imagine stripping that all away. No coffee, no cereal, no toothpaste. Your breakfast is a chunk of coarse bread, often stale. soaked in weak ale so you can chew it without breaking a tooth. And you don't eat alone. You eat with your family, your animals, and the dirt. Already, the question lingers, could you survive? This, outside, the sun is rising. The bell from the church tolls, echoing across the fields. To Thomas and his family, this is not just a signal of time, it is God's voice, commanding them to labor. Every step of their day is shaped by obligation, to the Lord, to the reeve, to the church, and to survival itself. Even on the rare days when there is no farming, there is mending, repairing, cooking, collecting wood. Life is a relentless cycle of labor, season after season. A good harvest means survival. A bad one could mean starvation. But survival in medieval England is not only about hunger and cold. It is about fear, fear of your Lord's punishment, fear of the priest's sermons about sin and hellfire, fear of strangers on the road who might rob or kill you, fear of your own neighbors, whose whispered accusations could condemn you as a heretic or a witch. And in this very village, there is a woman who will soon face such accusations. Widow Cooper, the healer. Her knowledge of herbs has saved lives, but it has also drawn suspicion. When hunger grows and sickness spreads, people look for someone to blame, and the church is eager to provide one. The shadow of her fate will fall across this family before our story ends. Why tell this story now? Because medieval England was not only mud, hunger, and superstition, it was the crucible in which much of modern society was forged. The values of resilience, community, faith, and obedience shaped generations. And though centuries separate us, some of those patterns still echo today. But the real reason is this: by stepping into their world, even for a moment, we see how fragile survival truly is. Strip away technology, medicine, and modern comforts, and you discover how much of life rests on sheer endurance. So let me ask again, could you survive medieval England? Over the next chapters, we will follow Thomas, Agnes, and their children through one day and beyond. We'll witness how peasants lived, worked, and prayed, how nobles feasted, schemed, and struggled with their own burdens, how death lingered at every door, how suspicion turned to accusation, and accusation to fire, how a simple journey to the market could open a window to the wider world. Along the way, you'll be asked to imagine yourself in their place. Would you endure? Would you resist? Would you survive? So here's my first question for you. Right now, if you woke up tomorrow in Thomas and Agnes's cottage, how long do you think you'd last? Days, weeks, or years? Leave your answer in the comments below, because, as we're about to see, survival here was not just about food and shelter. It was about silence, about obedience, about luck. And now, as the morning sun breaks over the fields of medieval England, the family rises to face another day, a day of toil, of faith, of danger, a day that could end in life or in death. And with that, our journey begins. The sun has barely crested the horizon, and already the village stirs. The rooster's cry is not an alarm clock you can silence. It is the signal that another day of labor has begun. For the peasant family, we follow Thomas, Agnes, and their children. This moment repeats itself every single morning, season after season, year after year. This is daily life in medieval England, and there is no pause button, no reprieve. To survive, you rise when the light comes, and you work until darkness swallows the fields. And when you collapse into your straw pallet at night, you pray that hunger, disease, or misfortune will not carry you away before dawn. So what exactly does this daily life look like? Let's step closer. Imagine waking not to the comfort of silence, but to the scratching of fleas in your straw bed, the squealing of a pig rooting nearby, the smoke of last night's fire still lingering thick in the air. There is no fresh sheet, no soft pillow, just a pallet stuffed with straw that sags in the middle, dampened by sweat, dirt, and the occasional mouse nest. Families sleep side by side for warmth. Children, parents, and even animals cram together on the floor. Privacy does not exist. You hear every cough, every snore, every rustle, and fleas. They do not discriminate. Even kings and queens scratch at bites in the night. When Agnes stirs, she doesn't reach for coffee, she reaches for the embers of last night's fire, blowing gently to coax flame from the ashes. Without fire, there is no warmth, no breakfast, no survival. Each morning begins with this fragile ritual, where a failed spark feels like a divine punishment. Breakfast is not eggs, bacon, or pancakes. It is bread, always bread, thick, coarse, made from barley or rye, sometimes mixed with ground beans or peas. It is dark, heavy, and hard enough to crack teeth if left too long. To soften it, peasants dunk it into weak ale, a drink brewed so low in alcohol that even children consume it daily. Why ale? Because water is dangerous. Streams are contaminated with waste, and wells often foul. Boiling water requires scarce firewood. Ale, however, is safer, filling, and sometimes the only option. The children chew slowly, their bellies never quite satisfied. Hunger is not an emergency in medieval life, is a constant condition. For peasants, being full is a luxury experienced only after a rare feast day. Most days, the stomach growls even after the bowl is scraped clean. Dressing for the day means slipping into woolen tunics and hose. Wool is coarse and heavy, scratchy against the skin, and never truly clean. Peasants might own 1 or 2 sets of clothing total, patched repeatedly until the fabric itself gives way. Linen undergarments, if they exist, are precious and washed only occasionally. Shoes are made of leather, but many children go barefoot year-round. Mud caked between toes is as natural as skin. In winter, frostbitten feet are common. Contrast this with nobles, silk, velvet, fur-lined cloaks, bright dyes. For peasants, color is raremost. Clothing is undyed or faded brown and grey, the color of dirt. Before the men march to the fields, chores must be done at home. Agnes and young Alice sweep the dirt floor with a bundle of twigs, pushing dust into the corners. The hut smells of damp straw, dung, and smoke. A pot of thin porridge simmers for later, made from oats stretched with water. John, the youngest, carries a wooden pail to fetch water. The well lies at the far end of the village. He stumbles barefoot along the muddy track, the morning air cold on his skin. The water he brings back is cloudy, but it must do. Boiling as a luxury, firewood is precious, and every stick must be scavenged from hedgerows or collected from the Lord's land at risk of punishment. Thomas and Robert, the eldest son, head into the open fields. The land is divided into long strips, each peasant assigned a portion to farm. But these strips are not theirs to own. They belong to the lord of the manor. The family works them under obligation, paying dues in grain, labor, and livestock. The soil is turned with a heavy wooden plough, often pulled by oxen, without fertilizer or modern tools. Farming is backbreaking, slow, and uncertain. Seeds must be sown by hand, weeds pulled. crops harvested with sickles. Weather rules everything. Too much rain rots the harvest, too little brings drought, and when famine strikes, there is no safety net. This is survival agriculture, not to prosper, but to scrape by. Animals are essentially it. They share the same living space. Chickens, pigs, and sometimes cows or goats sleep in the hut alongside. The family, their waste mixes with the straw on the floor, and the smell becomes part of daily life. Why? Because animals mean survival. Chickens lay eggs, pigs provide meat rarely slaughtered, mostly fattened for market, and cows provide milk. But animals also bring disease, fleas from pigs, lice from chickens, infections from cuts caused by hooves and horns. In an age without antibiotics, even a small wound can kill. Peasants do not own clocks or watches. Time is marked by the sun, the church bell, and the rhythm of chores. Work begins at sunrise and ends when it is too dark to see the fields. Meals and prayers structure the day. Seasons dictate tasks, ploughing in spring, harvesting in autumn, repairing tools in winter. There is no weekend, no holiday, except for the occasional feast day granted by the church. These are rare moments of respite, often the only chance to eat meat, sing, and dance. But most days, every hour belongs to labor. Let's pause here. What happens if you fall ill? There are no doctors for peasants, only folk remedies. A poultice of herbs, a whispered prayer, a blessing from the priest. A toothache can swell into a deadly infection. A small cut can fester into fever. Childbirth is a gamble for every woman. Bathing, rare. Water is cold, dirty, and hard to gather. Most peasants wipe their bodies with a damp cloth, perhaps once a week if possible. Fleas, lice, and worms thrive in this environment, and yet this is normal. Nobody expects clean skin or fresh clothes. Dirt is not a mark of shame. It is the universal condition of survival. Do not imagine children at play all day. By age 5, they carry water, tend animals, collect wood. By age 12, they work the fields like adults. Childhood, as we understand it, does not exist. Children are small workers, essential to survival. Robert, at 12, already knows how to swing a sickle. Alice, at 8, helps with cooking and sewing. John, only 6, gathers sticks and watches chickens. Their laughter is rare and fleeting, stolen during brief moments between chores. As the sun sinks, the family returns to the hut. Dinner is little more than another round of bread, perhaps a thin pottage made from peas, cabbage, onions, and whatever scraps remain. Meat is almost non-existent, perhaps a small portion of salted pork saved for winter. The family eats together, from a shared wooden bowl, each dipping their bread into the stew. Knives are few, spoons are precious. Everyone eats with their hands. After dinner, there may be storytelling by the fire, prayers led by Agnes, or simple songs, but exhaustion soon claims them. As the last embers fade, the family curls up again on the straw pallet, and the cycle begins anew. Pause for a moment. Could you endure this life? Could you wake each day to hunger, filth, and endless labor, knowing that one bad harvest could doom your entire family? Could you work under the reeve's watchful eye, fearing punishment, while scratching at flea bites that never heal? This is the reality of medieval peasant life. Brutal, relentless. Yet within it, there are flickers of resilience. The laughter of children, the warmth of a fire, the shared meal that, though meager, is shared together. So I ask you, what would you, miss the most if you woke up in this world clean water, meat, privacy, or comfort? Tell me in the comments, because, as hard as this life is, it is only the beginning. Soon, we will see how peasants not only labored under the weight of survival, but also under the crushing hand of authority. And that story begins with the fields, the manor, and the man who enforces the Lord's rule, the reeve. The morning sun climbs higher over the fields, and now Thomas and his son Robert take up their tools. Their lives are not their own. Every step they take into the Lord's farmland is a reminder that in medieval England, the very soil beneath your feet belongs to someone else. The feudal system is not an abstract diagram in a textbook. For Thomas's family, it is the invisible chain that binds them from birth to death. It dictates where they work, what they grow, how much they keep, and how much they must surrender. It is the framework that shapes every breath of their lives. So, what exactly did duty mean in the life of a medieval peasant? Each peasant family is assigned strips of land to farm. On paper, these strips seem like theirs. In reality, they are loans from the lord of the manor. In return for the right to farm, peasants must provide corvée labor days of unpaid work on the lord's domain, the land reserved for his direct benefit. For Thomas, this means several days each week where he and Robert put down their own tools and head to the Lord's fields. They plough, sow weed, or harvest under the reeve's supervision. The crops they tend here will never fill their own bellies. They belong to the Lord, who uses them to feed his household, support knights, or sell for profit. It is a system designed to keep peasants perpetually behind, working both for themselves and for their master, with little left over. The tools are primitive. The plough is a massive wooden frame, sometimes tipped with iron, dragged by oxen that move at a stubborn, lumbering pace. Robert strains on the yoke, guiding the beasts while Thomas pushes down on the handle to cut into the earth. The soil is heavy clay, progress is slow. Every furrow demands muscle. Every seed is scattered by hand. There are no machines to lighten the load. When weeds overrun a strip, peasants bend low for hours, plucking them by hand until their backs ache, and even with all this work, there is no guarantee of harvest. A bad season of rain or frost can undo months of labor. When that happens, famine follows, and famine is a killer. If farming itself weren't enough, peasants must surrender a portion of everything they produce. Some payments are in grain, some in animals, some in labor. On top of this, there is the tithe 1/10 of all produce owed to the church. Imagine working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, only to give a large slice of your reward to two masters, your Lord and your God. Refusal is not an option. The reeve enforces the Lord's demands, and the priest reminds you that failing to tithe is failing God himself. A peasant family often finishes the year with just enough grain to survive until the next harvest, sometimes less. Starvation is always a few bad weeks away. Every village has a reaver peasant chosen, or sometimes pressured, to enforce the Lord's rules. He oversees labor, collects dues, and ensures peasants perform their obligations. To defy the reeve is to defy the manor, and punishment follows swiftly. The reeve walks the fields, eyes sharp, noting who lingers too long, who hides a portion of grain, who shirks their corvée days. Thomas knows better than to test him. Robert, still young and fiery, sometimes mutters under his breath, but Agnes silences him with a glance. Words against the reeve can travel, and whispers are dangerous currency in a feudal village. The reeve is both neighbor and overseer, part of the same struggle, but wielding authority that sets him apart. What happens if a peasant fails his duties? The punishments are swift and humiliating. Stocks in the village square, where neighbors mock and jeer. Fines so heavy they strip a family of their savings. In severe cases, beatings or imprisonment in the manor's dungeon. And always, the knowledge that resistance leads to ruin. Justice in medieval England is not blind, it favors the powerful. A noble's word carries more weight than a peasant's life. For Thomas's family, survival means obedience, sometimes silent resentment, but never open rebellion. The church reinforces this hierarchy. Priests preach that God himself ordained the feudal system. To serve the Lord is to serve God. To question your place is to question divine will. On Sundays, the priest delivers sermons reminding peasants that their suffering on earth will be rewarded in heaven. They remain obedient. It is a powerful message for a people living in constant hardship. For Thomas and Agnes, faith is both comfort and cage. Spring means ploughing and sowing. Summer means weeding and tending. Autumn means harvesting from sunrise to sunset. Winter means mending tools, repairing roofs, and stretching every crumb of food until the fields come alive again. The cycle never ends. There is no retirement, no rest. Even the elderly carry small tasks, tending children, sorting grain, spinning wool. Every hand is required, every day, and still, death comes early. Most peasants never see their grandchildren grow up beneath. The surface of daily labor lies violence. Lords maintain their control not only through law, but through the threat of force. Knights, retainers, and soldiers can ride through the village at any time. If peasants revolt or fail in their duties, armed men will put them back in their place. Peasant uprisings did occur small acts of defiance, or larger revolts like the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, but for most, fear outweighed rebellion. The price of disobedience was too high. For Thomas and his family, every day's work is a balancing act. They labor in their own strips of land to feed themselves, while laboring in the Lord's strips to keep their right to farm. They pay taxes to the church to save their souls, and still they go hungry. This is not prosperity. This is survival, on the edge of collapse, bound by obligation and fear. So I ask you, could you bend your back to another man's soil, day after day, knowing the fruits of your labor would never be yours? Would you toil in silence, or would you risk defiance, knowing the stocks or worse await you? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because while labor and feudal duties shape the body, it is religion and superstition that shape the mind. In the next chapter, we'll see how every moment of a peasant's life, from birth to death, was framed not just by work, but by faith, fear, and the promise of heaven or hell. The church bell tolls across the village. Its sound is heavy, deep, and inescapable. For Thomas, Agnes, and their children, it is not merely a call to prayer, it is the very heartbeat of the world they live in. Time itself is divided by its rhythm. Dawn prayers, midday mass, evening bells. Each peal is a reminder. God is watching. The priest is watching. And your soul is never far from judgment. In medieval England, religion is not a compartment of life. It is life. To imagine a world without faith is impossible here. The church explains the mysteries of birth and death, health and illness, famine and plenty. And when explanations fail, superstition rushes in to fill the gaps. The village church stands at the center of daily life. Its stone walls loom above the thatched huts, both fortress and symbol. Inside, flickering candles cast shadows on painted saints, their eyes watching silently from wooden panels. Here, the priest preaches every week. His sermons are in Latin words the peasants do not understand, but the meaning is made clear through gestures, images, and the occasional harsh rebuke. His voice is the voice of authority through the church. Peasants learn who they are, sinners by birth, servants of God, bound to obedience on earth so they might hope for paradise beyond. Failure to obey the priest, failure to tithe, failure to confess, these are not simply social missteps. They are eternal risks. Religion is woven into the smallest moments. When Agnes rekindles the fire each morning, she whispers a prayer of thanks if it catches. If it doesn't, she wonders what sin brought God's displeasure. When Robert cuts his hand on the plough, Thomas makes the sign of the cross and mutters a blessing before binding it. Before meals, the family bows their heads, thanking God even for stale bread and weak ale. Every success is seen as divine favor, every failure divine punishment. If the weather turns foul, it is because the village angered God. If a child dies of fever, it is because sin has crept into the home. This worldview is both comforting and cruel. Comforting because it gives meaning to suffering. Cruel because it strips away human control. The peasants do not rely solely on prayer. They believe in the power of saints, holy men and women who intercede with God on their behalf. Small shrines dot the countryside. Relics, bones, cloth, or other objects linked to Saint Tsar, believed to hold miraculous power. If a child is gravely ill, Agnes might walk miles to touch a relic said to cure fevers. If crops fail, Thomas might offer a candle at the shrine of a saint known for protecting farmers. For those who can afford it, pilgrimages are made to great cathedrals, Canterbury, Walsingham, or even Rome. But for peasants, a pilgrimage is often local, to the nearest holy site they can reach on foot. The priest's sermons are filled with fire. Hell is described in vivid, terrifying detail, flames that never cease, demons that claw at sinners for eternity. A torment so great it dwarfs earthly suffering. Children grow up hearing these warnings. Agnes teaches Alice and John to recite the Lord's Prayer not just as a ritual, but as protection against damnation. The fear of sin becomes second nature, shaping choices, silencing rebellion, keeping the village in line. Even the smallest act, a lie, a theft. A moment of envy feels dangerous when hell is the price. Where faith ends, superstition begins. The peasants believe in charms and omens, in the power of herbs, in whispers carried by the wind. A black cat crossing your path may be a sign of ill luck. A sudden storm could mean witches are near. A child born with a birthmark might be touched by the devil. Widow Cooper, the village healer, walks this fine line. Her knowledge of herbs saves lives, but the priest's warnings brand her practices as suspicious. When children recover under her care, she is praised. When they die, she is blamed. Superstition is a double-edged sword, sometimes comfort, sometimes condemnation. For the lord of the manor, religion is a tool as much as it is a belief. The priest preaches obedience, not only to God, but to earthly masters. To defy your Lord is to defy the order of heaven itself. Thomas knows this well. Every Sunday, the priest reminds the villagers, as you serve your master here, so you serve the Lord above. It is a neat arrangement. The church sustains the Lord's power, and the Lord supports the church's authority. Together, they create a cage so complete that most peasants never dream of escape. One autumn, the rains are too heavy, the grain rots in the fields, hunger stalks the village. The priest calls a special mass. He declares that sin has brought God's wrath upon them. Perhaps someone has failed to tithe. Perhaps someone has consorted with witches. The peasants bow their heads, ashamed, fearful, though they know they worked as hard as humanly possible. It does not matter. The explanation is divine judgment, and the solution is obedience, fasting, prayer, confession, and so the cycle of faith and fear continues. When John falls ill with fever, Agnes tries everything: prayers, relics, herbs from Widow Cooper. For a moment, he improves. Then the fever returns. Agnes fears not only for his life, but for his soul. She begs the priest for a blessing. He sprinkles holy water, mutters words in Latin, and warns her to confess any sins that might block God's mercy. John recovers weak, but alive. Agnes weeps with gratitude, believing divine intervention saved him. Yet in her heart, she also thanks Widow Cooper. This silent conflict between church and healer grows quietly in the village shadows. For Thomas and Agnes, religion explains everything. Why crops grow, why children die, why lords rule, why peasants serve. It gives meaning to suffering but demands obedience in return. Faith is not only personal, it is communal. To be outside the church is to be outside the community itself. To question the priest, to doubt the sermons, is to risk isolation, suspicion, even accusation. And so peasants walk the narrow line, living in the tension between devotion and fear, comfort and control. So, let me ask you, would faith be your comfort here or your cage? Could you accept that every misfortune was divine punishment? Or would you quietly question in your heart? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because soon that question will not be theoretical. In this village, faith will be tested in the most brutal way through accusation, suspicion, and fire. But before we reach that shadow, we must look at those who stand above the peasants, the nobility. Their world of privilege, wealth, and politics casts a long shadow over the lives of those who labor beneath them. The manor looms above the village like a stone sentinel. Its walls rise higher than any peasant hut, its windows glazed with glass instead of smoke-stained holes. Inside, life unfolds with a rhythm that feels entirely different from the fields. Below, if Thomas and Agnes live hour to hour, scraping survival from the soil, the Lord and Lady live season to season, managing land, wealth, and alliances. But the gulf between their worlds is not simply one of comfort, it is one of structure, duty, and expectation. Nobility lives in privilege, yes, but also under the weight of obligations that peasants rarely glimpse. So what exactly did it mean to be a noble in medieval England? Step through the heavy wooden doors of the manor house. The air smells not of smoke and dung, but of roasted meat, beeswax candles, and herbs hung to mask less pleasant odors. The great hall stretches wide, with long tables for retainers and servants, and a raised dais where the lord and ladies sit apart. The floors are strewn with fresh rushes, replaced several times a year to soak up spills and waste. Tapestries line the walls, not only for decoration, but for insulation against the cold. Compared to the mud-floored huts of peasants, this space feels almost otherworldly. Meals are served on wooden or pewter plates. Wine flows alongside ale. Minstrels might play music. Jesters provide amusement. But don't imagine endless luxury drafts still seep through stone walls, and chamber pots remain a reality of daily life. Even the lord scratches at fleas sometimes. For nobles, food is a marker of status. Where peasants gnaw on bread and weak pottage, nobles feast on roasted meats, venison, boar, swan, and peacock, their feathers sometimes reattached for display. Fish, too, is common, especially on church-mandated fasting days. Spices imported from distant lands, pepper, cinnamon, cloves add exotic flavors. These are symbols of wealth as much as taste, each pinch a reminder of global trade routes funded by noble purses. Bread still dominates the table, but it is fine white bread made from sifted wheat, far removed from the coarse loaves of the village, and yet gluttony has its costs. Gout, obesity, and digestive troubles plague the nobility. Where peasants suffer hunger, nobles suffer excess. Clothing is perhaps the sharpest divide. Nobles wear bright dyes, silk, velvet, and furs. A noblewoman's gown might trail the floor, its sleeves so long they brush the rushes. A nobleman's tunic might be lined with ermine, its colors restricted by law to mark his status. Sumptuary laws enforce this divide, forbidding peasants from wearing fabrics or colors reserved for their betters. Dress becomes both a privilege and a prison, a constant performance of wealth. Marriage among nobles is not about love. It is about land, alliances, and power. Children are betrothed young, sometimes as early as 7. A girl might be sent to another household at 12, married by 14, expected to run a household and bear heirs before she has fully grown herself. Boys are raised for responsibility, trained in arms, schooled in Latin, prepared to manage. Estates are served as knights. For peasants, marriage binds to families for survival. For nobles, it binds to dynasties for control. It might be easy to imagine the lord of the manor as idle, living only to feast, but nobility carries its own obligations. Military duty. The king expects knights and soldiers when called. The lord must arm and feed them. Justice. The lord oversees the manorial court, deciding disputes, punishing offences, managing land rights. Economics. He must maintain his manor, collect rents, pay taxes to the crown, and make offerings to the church. Failure in these duties brings shame and risk. Even lords can fall, stripped of land and title, if they cannot uphold their responsibilities. Wealth is relative. To a peasant, the lord is unimaginably rich. But from within the manor, wealth feels fragile. Castles cost money to maintain. Knights demand wages. The church requires donations. The crown calls for taxes. A poor harvest affects the lord, too less. Rent collected, less surplus to sell. Debt stalks even noble families, forcing marriages of convenience or sales of land to stay afloat. So while peasants scrape by at the edge of starvation, nobles balance at the edge of financial ruin. Nobles live by the sword. Their children are raised in the arts of war. Hunting is not only sport but training. Every ride a rehearsal for battle. Feuds between noble families can erupt into violence that consumes entire villages. For peasants, war is devastation. Fields burned, homes plundered, men pressed into service. For nobles, war is both danger and opportunity, a chance to gain glory, land, or ransom. Just as peasants rely on the priests for guidance, nobles rely on the church for legitimacy. Their donations build chapels, fund monasteries, and purchase prayers for their souls. A noble's piety is public, building shrines, hosting feast days, sponsoring pilgrimages. But nobles also fear the church. A lord who defies the bishop risks excommunication, a punishment as severe as death, for it cuts him from both heaven and society. Picture the great hall on a winter's night. Torches blaze, roasting spits turn slowly, servants bustle carrying trenchers piled high. The lord sits at the dais, his lady beside him, their children clustered nearby. Below them, retainers and lesser guests eat at long tables, drinking ale, laughing, arguing. A minstrel sings of King Arthur's knights, a jester capers, drawing laughter. The hall is alive with sound and light, yet even here tension runs beneath the merriment. The lord calculates the cost of each spice, wonders whether his neighbor plots against him, listens carefully to every rumor brought by traveling merchants. The feast is not only pleasure, it is politics, display, and control. Lady Eleanor, the lord's wife, rises before dawn. She oversees the household, directs servants, manages stores of food and clothing. She tends to children, organizes feast days, and maintains appearances of grace. But her burden is heavy. At 15, she was married to a man twice her age. At 16, she nearly died in childbirth. She knows her worth lies in heirs, alliances, and appearances. Beneath her silks, she carries scars invisible to peasants and nobles alike. To peasants, nobles are figures of untouchable power. To nobles themselves, life is a careful balancing act, 12th displayed. Alliances forged, responsibilities shouldered, dangers avoided. The divide is real and vast. But hardship exists on both sides, though of very different kinds. Where peasants suffer hunger, nobles suffer politics. Where peasants labor under obligation, nobles labor under expectation. So I ask you, if you had the chance, would you trade places with the lord of the manor? Would you endure hunger, filth, and fear, or the endless pressure of wealth, politics, and war? Tell me in the comments, because as we turn back from the stone walls of the manor to the dirt paths of the village, another shadow looms. Not hunger, not the reeve, not even the lord, but death itself, silent, sudden, and everywhere. The sun sets, and the shadows of medieval England lengthen. But these shadows are not only cast by the fading light, they are the ever-present spectre of death. For peasants like Thomas and Agnes, life is short, uncertain, and fragile. They measure their days not in years, but in harvests, in children born and children buried, in neighbors lost suddenly to fever, accident, or famine. Death is not a distant idea. It is a visitor that enters the cottage often, sometimes quietly, sometimes with violence, and it shapes every part of life, belief, ritual, family, and fear. So what did it mean to live under the constant shadow of death in medieval England? The family wakes one morning to the cry of Agnes's sister, Margaret, from a hut nearby. Her newborn child, only a few days old, has stopped breathing during the night. This is no rare tragedy. In medieval England, as many as half of all children die before the age of 5. Fever, infection, malnutrition, any of them can strike suddenly. For the living, there is grief, yes, but also resignation. Death in infancy is so common that parents learn to balance love with caution. They cherish every moment, but in the back of their minds, they know survival is uncertain. For Agnes, the sight of her sister weeping is both heartbreaking and familiar. She has lost children of her own. She knows she may lose more. In this world, motherhood is both blessing and wound. When Robert cuts his hand on the plough, the wound festers, Red streaks creep up his arm, his fever climbs. Today we would call it infectious. We would treat it with antibiotics, clean dressings, perhaps a hospital stay. In medieval England, such remedies do not exist. Agnes turns to herbs, applying poultices of honey and garlic. She whispers prayers at his bedside. She calls for Widow Cooper, who brews a bitter tea from willow bark. For days, Robert hovers between life and death. This is the daily terror. The smallest wound, the simplest illness can end a life. And often they do. But sometimes death comes not in small wounds, or fevers it comes like a storm. In 1347, the Black Death reaches England. Fleas carried by rats spread plague through villages and towns. Buboes swell in the armpits and groin. Fevers rage. Bodies turn black with gangrene. Entire families die within days. Entire villages are emptied. For Thomas and Agnes, news of the plague spreads faster than the disease itself. Whispers in the market. Stories of carts piled with corpses in London. Priests, once confident in their sermons, now tremble. When the plague finally reaches their region, fear takes over. Neighbors lock themselves inside huts. Families abandon loved ones at the first sign of swelling. The graveyard fills so quickly that new pits must be dug outside the village walls. It is a horror beyond comprehension, and yet it becomes part of the medieval story. Another reminder of life's fragility. Death also comes at the edge of a blade. Peasants are not warriors, but war finds them nonetheless. Lords feud, kings march, soldiers pillage. When armies pass, peasants lose everything: grain, livestock, homes, sometimes their lives. For Thomas, the memory of a raid years earlier still lingers. Men on horseback swept through the fields, setting fire to hayricks, seizing chickens and pigs. His neighbor William tried to resist. He was cut down where he stood. For peasants, violence is arbitrary, sudden, and merciless. Death by war is not heroic. It is a reminder that even the quietest village lies under the shadow of noble ambition. When death comes, rituals follow. The priest arrives, his robes heavy, his Latin words rolling over the mourners. The body is washed, wrapped, and buried in consecrated ground, if possible. The churchyard becomes a crowded place, graves marked by wooden crosses that weather and vanish within years. The community gathers, not only to grieve, but to witness. Funerals are social acts as much as spiritual ones. They remind the living of their own mortality. For peasants, the phrase memento mori, remember you will die, is not a philosophical exercise. It is daily reality. For women, death hides. In childbirth, every pregnancy is a gamble. Midwives and healers attend, but complications are frequent. Bleeding, infection, obstructed labor, all are deadly without modern medicine. Agnes herself has known this risk. With each child she bore, she wondered if it would be her last breath. She knows other women who have not survived the trial, for every cradle filled, a grave may be dug. This constant threat shapes how families view women's lives and roles. To bear children is both a duty and a danger. Here is the hardest truth. In medieval England, death is so constant that it becomes almost ordinary. Children see corpses before they understand words. Peasants walk past churchyards filled with fresh graves. Skulls dug up by ploughs are set aside with a shrug. Does this mean people are numb? Not at all. Grief is real. Mourning is real. But the rhythm of life leaves little time to dwell. Survival demands the living return to work quickly, no matter how heavy the heart. One evening, a fire breaks out in a nearby cottage. Sparks leap from the hearth onto the rushes. Within minutes, the thatch roof is ablaze. Neighbors rush with buckets, but the flames spread faster than they can contain. By dawn, the cottage is ash. A child inside did not survive. For peasants, fire is both necessity and threat. Without it, they freeze and starve. With it, they risk losing everything in a single spark. Death hides even in the hearth that sustains life. In one terrible winter, the harvest fails. Grain is scarce, animals thin. Thomas's family stretches every crumb of bread, boiling nettles and wild roots to make bitter soups. Children cry from hunger at night. One by one, the weakest villagers fade. The elderly stop rising from their beds. A child collapses in the fields, too weak to carry water. Hunger does not kill quickly. It lingers, weakens, steals breath over weeks, and it leaves scars on the survivor's scars of desperation, guilt, and silence. So what does death teach the peasants of medieval England? It teaches them humility. Every breath is fragile, every harvest uncertain, every moment borrowed. It teaches them community. Funerals, prayers, and shared grief bind the village together. It teaches them obedience. The church, the Lord, the Revel promise protection, even if they cannot truly deliver it, and it teaches them resilience. To live in constant shadow and still laugh, still love, still hope that is survival. So let me ask you, could you live with death as your daily neighbor? If every cough might be the last, if every pregnancy might end in a grave, if every meal might be the final one, how would you live? Would fear consume you, or would you learn, like Thomas and Agnes, to carry on regardless? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because as heavy as this shadow is, it is not the darkest to fall on this village. Death may be constant, but suspicion, accusation, and fear of the supernatural will soon turn neighbor against neighbor. And at the center of that storm stands a woman whose fate will shake the community, Widow Cooper, the healer. The nights grow colder, and the fields whisper with frost. Inside Thomas and Annis's cottage, a cough lingers in young John's chest. His face is pale, his breath rattles. Agnes kneels at his side, whispering prayers. Thomas paces, torn between faith and fear. And then Agnes speaks the name every villager knows, but few dare to say aloud. We should call Widow Cooper. Widow Cooper lives at the edge of the village, her hut tucked against the forest line. She is an old woman, her hair white, her hands knotted from years of grinding herbs and tending wounds. Some call her a healer, others call her dangerous. She knows plants, willow bark for fever, honey for wounds, nettle for the blood, mint for the stomach. She knows chants and charms, passed down from her mother and grandmother before her. To the villagers, she is both hope and risk when children recover under her care. People whisper gratitude. When they die, suspicion grows. And always, the priest warns against her. The devil wears the mask of comfort. Beware the woman who claims to heal outside God's grace. Thomas and Agnes carry John to her hut. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. A small fire burns low, casting shadows across jars filled with powders, roots, and oils. Widow Cooper examines the boy, her fingers surprisingly gentle. She murmurs not Latin prayers, but old words in English, half heard and half mystery. She brews a bitter tea of willow and thyme, pressing the cup to John's lips. For 3 nights they follow her instructions. The fever breaks. John breathes easier. Agnes weeps with relief, thanking God in her prayers, but silently in her heart. She thanks Widow Cooper. News spreads quickly. John is well again. Some nod, saying Widow Cooper's herbs worked. Others frown, whispering that she meddles with unnatural forces. One woman mutters, "She saved my child last winter." Another spits, "She took my cow's milk with her spells." Suspicion is a seed, and the soil of the village is fertile. On Sunday, the priest's sermon burns with fire. He speaks of witches, of Satan's snares, of the danger of trusting women who promise healing outside the church. His eyes sweep the congregation. No names are spoken, but everyone feels them. Agnes bows her head, clutching John's hand. Thomas feels the weight of silence pressing on his chest. To defend Widow Cooper openly would be dangerous. To remain silent feels like betrayal. This is the trap of medieval life. Truth is dangerous. Silence is survival. Whispers tell of Widow Cooper's husband, long dead from fever. Left alone, she turned to the skills her mother had taught her. For decades, she has been the one villagers call when priests are far. When sickness spreads, when women labor in childbirth, she has delivered babies, set broken bones, treated wounds from farm accidents. Her knowledge is practical, tested, passed through generations of women, and yet, because it is women's knowledge, unblessed by priests, it is suspect. Why is Widow Cooper dangerous? Not because her herbs harm, but because her independence challenges the church's monopoly on healing and truth. The church fears knowledge it cannot control. A woman with remedies is a rival to the priest with sacraments, and in a world where obedience is survival, rivals are not tolerated. For peasants, this fear becomes contagious. To be seen at Widow Cooper's hut is to risk suspicion yourself. To speak in her defense is to risk accusation. Still, villagers come, quietly, at night. A mother brings a child with a rash. A farmer limps in with a twisted ankle. A young woman whispers of trouble in her womb. Widow Cooper helps them all, asking little, in return an egg, a loaf of bread, a few sticks of firewood. Her hut is both sanctuary and snare, comfort and risk. One winter, a cow dies suddenly in the field. Its owner, furious at the loss, declares it was cursed. He claims he saw Widow Cooper passing nearby the day before. Another villager recalls her herbs failing to cure a fever. Another mutters about strange lights seen in the woods near her hut. The whispers coalesce into a single word, which the Reeve, ever watchful for disorder, reports the rumors to the manor. The Lord frowns, but does not act yet. The priest, however, seizes the moment. In his next sermon, he names her outright. Widow Cooper, accused of witchcraft. The village shudders. To be accused is to be condemned in the minds of many. The line between healer and heretic has vanished. That night, Thomas and Agnes whisper in the dark. Agnes wants to defend her. She saved John. She has saved others. Thomas shakes his head. To speak for her is to invite suspicion. Do you want our children to suffer for it? Their silence feels like betrayal, but their fear is greater. Survival demands silence, and so they say nothing. This is how accusations thrive, not through certainty, but through silence. Widow Cooper represents more than one woman's fate. She embodies the fragile survival of traditional knowledge medicine herbs, women's wisdom that the church cannot control. Her existence is both a lifeline and a threat. When the church declares her a witch, it is not only condemning a woman, it is declaring war on knowledge that slips through its fingers. And for peasants, the lesson is clear. Rely on her, but do not be seen. Use her remedies, but never speak her name too loudly. Survival means discretion. So let me ask you, if your child lay dying, would you risk going to Widow Cooper, or would you obey the priest and trust only prayer? Would you speak her name in defense, or remain silent to protect your family? Tell me in the comments, because silence will not save Widow Cooper forever. Soon, suspicion will harden into accusation, and accusation into trial. And when the church turns its full gaze upon her, the entire village will tremble. The frost lies heavy on the fields, crunching beneath the boots of peasants trudging to work. Smoke curls from cottage chimneys. To the casual eye, it is an ordinary morning. But the air in the village feels thick, uneasy, because the whispers about Widow Cooper have become louder than whispers. They have become accusation. It begins with the reeve. He has heard enough tales, cows cursed, fevers worsened, strange lights near the woods. He rides to the manor, presents the stories to the Lord and, more importantly, to the priest. The priest seizes the opportunity. From the pulpit he thunders, "The devil hides among us. A woman consorts with demons, mocking God with false remedies. You know her name. She must answer for her crimes." No one speaks aloud, but everyone knows. Widow Cooper is condemned in the villagers' minds before a trial is even announced. At dusk, men come to Widow Cooper's hut. The reeve leads them, flanked by two of the Lord's retainers. They push open her door. Her herbs hang drying in bunches. Her fire glows low. Her mortar still damp from grinding roots. She protests, "I have healed your children, your wives, your mothers." But they bind her wrists and drag her into the night. Neighbors peek from behind shutters, hearts pounding. None intervene. Thomas and Agnes watch silently, John clutching Annis's hand. He remembers she saved his life, but they say nothing. To defend her now would mean risking everything. The next day, Widow Cooper stands in the manorial court. The hall is crowded. The Lord presides, the priest at his side, the reeve standing stiff with authority. The charges are read, practicing witchcraft, consorting with the devil, spreading disease, cursing livestock. She denies it all. She speaks of herbs, not spells. She speaks of knowledge passed down through mothers, not demons. But her words are nothing against fear. The priest raises a hand. Even Satan can cloak his lies in soothing words. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Her defense sounds like guilt to ears already primed to condemn. Custom demands a witch's mark. Be found some blemish or scar said to be the devil's brand. Women of the village are ordered to search her body. They find a mole on her shoulder. It is enough. Whispers spread, their proof. Never mind that every villager bears scars and marks. Once suspicion takes root, the smallest evidence blooms into certainty. Some demand an ordeal trial by water. It is a brutal spectacle. Widow Cooper is bound and lowered into the village pond. If she sinks, she is innocent. If she floats, it is proof of witchcraft. She thrashes, gasps, sinks beneath the icy water. Men haul her out before she drowns, coughing and shivering. She floated, the reeve declares. The priest nods grimly to the villagers. The outcome was never in doubt. The ritual is not justice, it is confirmation. In the days that follow, the village lives in fear. Some avoid the healer's name altogether. Others whisper it only to curse her. Agnes feels torn. She remembers John's fever breaking under Widow Cooper's care. Yet she clutches her rosary tighter when neighbors speak. To defend the healer now is to risk her own children's safety. Thomas counsels silence. Robert mutters angrily, but swallows his words when the reeve passes. Silence becomes the only shield. A frightened boy, coached by his father, swears he saw Widow Cooper muttering to herself in the fields, after which his cow died. His trembling voice carries weight in court. She pleads, "I speak to no one but God and my own heart." But the boy's words seal another nail in her coffin. In medieval justice, testimony need not be true, it need only be believed in the Manners, cellar, Widow Cooper is tied to a stool. Questions rain down. Who gave you power? What demons do you serve? Who else is guilty? She denies, denies, denies. But pain breaks even the strongest. Sleep deprivation, binding cords, cold water poured until her breath falters at last. Delirious, she whispers a name not of another woman, but of a saint she prays to. The priest seizes on it as proof of consorting with spirits. A confession is extracted, and once confessed, guilt is sealed. The trial is more than punishment for one woman. It is a warning to all neighbors. Avoid each other's eyes, wondering who will be next. Every act of kindness, every charm whispered, every herb brewed could now be seen as witchcraft. Thomas senses the weight on his family. Agnes avoids Widow Cooper's name in her prayers. Robert clenches his fists, furious at the injustice, but his anger is swallowed by fear. The village is not only punishing one woman, it is teaching itself to obey. The Lord and priest confer. The verdict is inevitable. Widow Cooper is condemned as a witch. Her sentence, execution, whether by hanging or by fire, the result is the same. Her life is forfeit. In the square, she is paraded, bound and trembling but unbroken. She cries out to the villagers, "I healed your children. I fed your sick. Will none of you speak?" No one does. Silence is survival. Years later, John will remember that day. He will remember her eyes searching the crowd, landing on him, the boy she once saved. He will remember his mother clutching him tighter, whispering, "Don't look, don't speak." He will remember the silence of the village, louder than the crackle of flames. Widow Cooper's fate is not unique. Across medieval England, healers, midwives, and women who lived outside convention were accused of witchcraft. Accusations were rarely about truth. They were about fear, control, and the church's need to assert authority. For peasants, the lesson was clear. Knowledge outside the church is dangerous. Survival means silence. So let me ask you, if you had lived in that village, would you have spoken for Widow Cooper or stayed silent to save your family? Would you risk the stocks, the lash, the brand of heretic, or would you bow your head and let injustice pass? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because after the flames die down, life does not stop. Hunger still gnaws, fields still need ploughing, and so Thomas and his family must carry on, turning their eyes toward the one rare break. In their endless toil, the market fair, where the village meets the wider world. The village still hums with unease after Widow Cooper's trial. Ashes linger in memory, if not on the ground. But life does not pause for grief. Hunger gnaws, Death's call, and the rhythm of survival continues. For Thomas and Agnes, one rare event pierces the monotony of toil, the annual market fair. It is the one time peasants can step beyond the confines of their fields and glimpse the wider world, to sell, to trade, to see faces from other villages, to hear news from towns they'll never visit. To them, it is both adventure and necessity. The family begins days in advance. Agnes bakes coarse loaves of barley bread to sell. Thomas selects a chicken, tied by its legs, to barter. Robert gathers a bundle of firewood and a sack of onions. Alice, eager but nervous, stitches a small cloth purse for coins. Even John, still young, polishes a wooden cup carved by his uncle, hoping to fetch a few pennies. They cannot afford to lose anything. Every item carried to market is part of their survival for winter. At dawn, they set out. The dirt track stretches miles, lined by hedgerows, crossing streams by crude wooden bridges. Other villagers walk alongside neighbors, friends, sometimes rivals. The road itself is dangerous. Bandits haunt lonely stretches. Travelers go in groups, carrying sticks or knives for defense. Fear sharpens every sound, the crack of a branch, the distant bark of dogs. But as more paths converge, the road swells with people, peddlers with carts, shepherds herding sheep, women balancing baskets on their heads. The air thickens with anticipation. By midday, they crest a hill and see it, a sprawl of tents and stalls, bright banners fluttering, smoke rising from cooking fires. The sound reaches them before the smell, laughter, haggling, bells, the clatter of hooves. It is overwhelming. For children like Alice and John, it feels like stepping into another world. The fair is chaos and wonder combined. Merchants cry out their wares, cloth from Flanders, salt from the coast, spices from faraway lands. Butchers roast meat on spits, the scent of sizzling fat filling the air. Jugglers toss knives, jesters caper. Musicians pluck lutes and pipes. A bear, chained and muzzled, dances awkwardly to a drum beat. To the children's wide-eyed amazement, it is spectacle and survival blended. Thomas approaches a cloth seller, hoping to trade his chicken. The merchant eyes it, prods it, then offers less than half its worth. Negotiation begins, voices sharp, hands gesturing. The dance of barter. Agnes sells her bread quickly, though for fewer coins than she hoped. Robert's onions fetch a modest price. Alice, clutching her stitched purse, beams when a kindly woman buys John's wooden cup. The family earns little, but every penny counts. They spend cautiously, a small pot of salt, a scrap of dyed cloth for Alice, a second-hand knife for Robert. The fair is not only about goods, it is about information. Traveling merchants bring news of distant places, wars in France, rumors of plague, decrees from the king. A man whispers of increased church investigations. Bishops hunting heretics and witches. The villagers listen carefully, but speak carefully, too. Words are currency. A careless comment can brand one a traitor, a heretic, or worse. Thomas keeps his questions vague. Agnes murmurs, replies in coded phrases. Everyone has learned to survive under watchful ears. For a few hours, the family allows themselves to enjoy the fair. John watches a puppet show, giggling as wooden figures quarrel. Alice marvels at a woman selling coloured ribbons, her eyes wide. At hues she has never seen before. Robert lingers near the archery range, watching young men loose arrows at painted targets. Even Thomas and Agnes smile as minstrels sing songs of saints and battles. For a brief moment, the weight of survival lifts. But the fair is no paradise. Pickpockets slip through the crowd. Robert nearly loses the knife from his belt before Thomas catches the thief's hand. A drunken man stumbles, shouting blasphemies, only to be seized by church officers. Fights break out when prices are disputed. A boy cries when his father discovers their purse missing. The fair is freedom, yes, but freedom laced with risk. Agnes approaches a spice seller, drawn by the scent of cinnamon. He offers her a small pouch for a single coin, a fortune by their measure. She hesitates. He insists. Thomas frowns. Finally, Agnes realizes the pouch is half filled with sawdust, disguised beneath the spice. They walk away, shaken. Even in moments of wonder, deceit lurks as Thomas waits at a grain stall. He overhears two merchants speaking in lowered tones. The bishop's men are coming. Aye, more trials, more witches. Their words chill him. Even here, far from the village, the shadow of Widow Cooper lingers. The fair may feel free, but the church's gaze stretches everywhere. As the sun sets, the family begins the trek home. Their packs are lighter. Some goods sold, some pennies spent. The children chatter about sightseeing, Alice twirling her ribbon, John replaying the puppet show in his mind. But Thomas is quiet. He thinks of the merchant's whispers. He thinks of the reeve's sharp eyes back home. He thinks of the price of survival, silence, obedience, and luck. The fair is escape, yes, but only temporary. Tomorrow the fields await. Tomorrow hunger gnaws again. Tomorrow life resumes its relentless cycle. The market fair is more than trade. It is a mirror of medieval life, vibrant, communal, but always under the shadow of risk. For peasants, it is the rare moment of choice, of color, of laughter. Yet it is also a reminder that freedom is fleeting, bound by coin, by fear, by authority. So let me ask you, would you have risked your goods, your safety, and your silence to step into the chaos of the medieval market? Would you haggle with merchants, laugh at jesters, and taste roasted meat? Or would you stay in the safety of your hut, avoiding both joy and danger? Tell me in the comments, because after the fair, after the fleeting taste of freedom, life narrows once more. And now it is time to step back and see the larger picture, how villages, markets, manors, and churches all fit into the vast structure of medieval England, and how little control peasants truly had over their lives. The family returns from the fair with tired feet and lighter packs. The ribbon Alice clutches glows in the firelight, brightening their hut more than the single candle. John hums the tune of a minstrel's song. For a moment, the memory feels sweet, but Thomas sits silently by the hearth, staring into the embers. He has heard too much on the road, too much in the whispers at the grain stall. Bishops hunting heretics, trials multiplying, nobles feuding, kings waging wars across the sea. He realizes what every peasant eventually learns. Their world is not just their village. It is bound to a web of lords, bishops, and kings, a web that holds them tight. And within that web, justice is not what we imagine today. It is something harsher, narrower, and deeply unequal. Justice begins close to home, the manorial court, held in the great hall of the Lord's manor. Here peasants gather when summoned. The reeve calls names, the steward records. Dues and disputes are aired. A cow that wandered into another's field, a debt unpaid, A peasant accused of stealing firewood from the Lord's forest. The punishments are swift, a fine, often heavy enough to bite into winter survival, a day in the stocks. Humiliation as neighbors mock. In harsher cases, whipping or confiscation of goods. There is no lawyer, no jury of peers. The Lord or his appointed steward decides, and the Lord's interest is always clear. Protect his authority, his land, his wealth. For Thomas, attendance at court is not optional. Failure to appear means heavier fines, harsher punishments. Justice here is not blind. It sees clearly who holds power. Above the manor lies the royal court system, the king's justice. But for peasants, reaching it is almost impossible. The distance is great, the costs higher, and the risks enormous. Royal courts deal with larger crimes, murder, treason, disputes between nobles. But for commoners, appealing beyond the manor is unthinkable. The journey alone could cost more than a year's earnings. In theory, the king's justice promises fairness. In practice, it serves those who can afford it. Then there is the church court, which deals with sins, morality, and heresy. Here, guilt is measured not only by action but by belief. Failing to tithe, skipping confession, questioning the priest's sermons, all can land a peasant before the church's gaze. Punishments range from fines to public penance, from excommunication to execution for heresy. And unlike manorial law, church law follows you everywhere. You cannot hide from God's court. Widow Cooper's trial was not only local fear, it was part of this wider machinery of church justice. A machine that punishes not only deeds but thoughts, whispers, suspicions. For nobles, justice looks different. A knight who kills a peasant in a drunken brawl might face only a fine, if that. A lord who seizes land illegally may be scolded but rarely punished. Wealth buys forgiveness. Rank buys immunity. Even the church bends for nobility. Bishops rely on noble patrons. Priests fear their anger. Justice bends with status, always tilting against the poor. One spring, Thomas's neighbor, William, is accused of stealing wood from the Lord's forest. His family needed fuel. The winter was long. At court, the reeve testifies. The priest adds weight, declaring theft a sin. William protests, but his voice carries no authority. The fine is crushing, more than he can pay. To cover it, he must surrender his goat, the family's only source of milk. His children weep, his wife begs. The Lord remains unmoved. For the village, the lesson is sharp. Justice is not mercy. Justice is order. Beyond the village, nobles and kings feud, and peasants pay the price. Taxes rise to fund wars in France. Sons are pressed into service, armed with nothing more than a spear. Fields burn when armies pass through. The peasants are pawns in struggles they cannot understand. Sacrifices in games of power far beyond their reach. What, then, is justice in medieval England? It is not fairness. It is not equality. It is control. It ensures the Lord's land is farmed, the church's coffers are filled, the king's wars are funded. For peasants, justice is endurance. To survive means to bend, to pay, to stay silent when needed. Yet the market fare reminds Thomas that the world is vast. Merchants speak of towns with stone streets, of cathedrals that scrape the sky, of ships that sail to faraway lands. There is more to England than fields and huts. But he also knows this. Those faraway worlds belong to others, not to him. His place is the village, his duty the soil, his fate bound by rules written by lords and priests. The larger world brings wonder, yes, but it also reinforces the truth. The cage is not just the hut, the manor, or the church. It is the entire structure of medieval society. From the lowest peasant to the highest noble, everyone is bound by duty. But the weight is not equal. The lord's burden is wealth and politics. The peasant's burden is hunger and fear. Justice, as peasants know it, is not blind. It sees rank, wealth, and obedience, and punishes those without them. So let me ask you, would you accept this world, living quietly within its rules? Or would you risk everything to challenge it? Would you bow your head in silence before the reeve and the priest, or would you try, however small, to push back? Tell me in the comments, because as our journey nears its end, we must step back one final time. We must look not only at the toil, the fear and the injustice, but also at what survival itself meant in this brutal, beautiful, fragile world. The candle gutters low in Thomas and Agnes's hut. The ribbon from the fair hangs by Alice's bedside, a bright streak of colour in a world of grey. John sleeps curled at his mother's side, Robert already snoring on the straw pallet. Outside, the night is quiet, save for the rustle of the wind in the fields. But beneath that silence lies the hum of everything we have seen: labour, hunger, fear, faith, death, and resilience. This is medieval England, and after all we've witnessed, the straw beds, the endless labour, the church bells, the shadows of death, the fire that consumed Widow Cooper, the chaos of the market, the iron grip of law, I ask you once more, could you survive here? Survival is more than food in the belly or a roof overhead. It is silence in the face of injustice. It is obedience when rebellion stirs in the heart. It is accepting hunger as normal, filth as ordinary, death as neighbour. For Thomas and Agnes, survival means bowing to the reeve, paying the tithe, attending mass, working the strips of land they do not own. It means raising children knowing half may die before adulthood. It means enduring day after day without expectation of change. Could you bear such weight? Think back to the beginning, the straw pallet on the dirt floor, the chickens scratching in the corner, the fleas that bite all. Night, no privacy, no comfort, no choice. Would you last a week without clean sheets, running water, or even a moment to yourself? Would you endure the cold creeping through the cracks in the wall, the smell of dung mingling with smoke, the cough of a sick child echoing through? The night, modern life softens us. Medieval life hardened them. Every day's work, not the work of offices or screens, but the breaking of backs in fields, ploughing clay soil with wooden tools, hauling water from muddy streams, gathering firewood. Under the eye of the reeve, there is no weekend, no holiday except those demanded by the church. Labour is not a path to wealth. It is a desperate attempt to hold hunger at bay. Could you rise at dawn, work until dusk, and collapse with nothing more than bread and ale to sustain you? Could you repeat it tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, knowing nothing will change? For peasants, faith is not a choice. It is the air they breathe. Every crop, every illness, every storm is explained by God's will. The priest's sermons shape thought as much as command, but faith is also fear, fear of sin, fear of hellfire, fear of witches and demons lurking in the shadows. Could you live with every misfortune interpreted as punishment from heaven? Could you accept that your soul's fate depends not only on your heart, but on your obedience to men in robes. The manna rises above the huts. The Lord feasts on roasted swan, while peasants gnaw stale bread. His children wear silk, while peasant children go barefoot. And yet, even nobles live under pressure. Wealth is fragile, alliances brittle, politics ruthless. They wield power, but they are also prisoners of it. Would you trade places? Would you bear the burden of politics, debt, and war for the taste of meat and the feel of velvet? Or would you cling to the simplicity of the fields, harsh though they are? Death is the most faithful presence in medieval life. Infants, buried before they can walk, mothers dying in childbirth, men cut down by fever, wound, or famine, entire villages emptied by plague. Imagine carrying your child to the churchyard again and again. Imagine rising the next morning to plough, because the field cannot wait for grief. Could you live with death as constant companion? Could you keep going, knowing tomorrow might claim you or your loved ones? And then there is Widow Cooper. She healed, she saved, she helped, and for that she burned. Her story is not just about one woman. It is about the cost of standing outside the boundaries of church and Lord. It is about knowledge feared, independence punished, survival sacrificed to control. Would you have spoken for her? Or would you, like Thomas and Agnes, remain silent to protect your children? This is survival's cruelest demand, silence in the face of injustice. For a moment there was joy, music, color, laughter, salt and spices, ribbons and songs. A puppet show that made John laugh until he cried. But even the fair was laced with danger, thieves, deceits, whispers of bishops' hunts. Even in freedom, the cage was visible. Could you enjoy those fleeting moments of joy, knowing they are bought with silence, risk, and fear? Could you dance while the shadow of the church looms over every smile? And above it all, the system of justice, manorial court, church court, king's justice, fines that ruin families, whippings that scar backs, excommunications that exile souls. Justice here is not fairness, it is control. Would you endure such a system? Or would you rebel, knowing rebellion brings the stocks, the lash, or the noose? The market shows peasants a glimpse of the larger world, towns with stone streets, cathedrals that scrape the sky, ships that sail to unknown lands. But these worlds are not theirs. Their world is the hut, the field, the reeve. The church survival means knowing your place and staying in it. And yet, despite the hunger, despite the fear, despite the injustice, the peasants endure. They laugh by the fire. They sing on feast days. They cradle their children, mourn their dead, and rise again the next day. The human spirit bends, but it does not break. Perhaps that is the true lesson of medieval England. Not the cruelty of lords or the power of the church, but the resilience of ordinary people who survived in the cracks of history. So now, I ask you for the last time, could you survive medieval England? Would you endure the straw pallet, the hunger, the endless labor? Would you bow your head to priest and lord, knowing silence is safety? Would you face death daily and still find reasons to smile? Or would you falter? Would you rebel? Would you break under the weight of survival? Tell me honestly, how long would you last? If this journey moved you, if you felt the weight of the past pressing close, then join us again. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of history brought vividly to life. Leave a comment. How long do you think you would have lasted in medieval England? A day, a week, a lifetime? And share this with someone who thinks they could tough it out. Let them see the truth of survival, when comfort and choice are stripped away, because history is not just dates and kings. It is lives, lived in dirt and fire, in fear and faith, in silence and resilience. And if we look closely enough, we see ourselves in them. The fields lie fallow, the harvest stored, the days shortened. For Thomas and Agnes, life is still hard, but not every moment is filled with ploughing or hauling water. Even in a world of labor and fear, peasants carve out moments of celebration, brief windows of joy where music rises above hunger and stories burn brighter than the shadows of death. So let us step into their moments of release, into the festivals, feasts, and fireside tales of medieval England. And let us ask, can joy truly flourish in a world of hardship? Life in the village is measured not only by the seasons, but by the church calendar. Over 100 days a year are marked as feast days, some honoring saints, some tied to the rhythm of planting or harvest. For peasants, feast days are both blessing and burden. On these days, labor pauses. Fields are left alone, ploughs stand still. And for a rare moment, peasants breathe. But the church dictates the reason. These are holy days, opportunities to bow before God, to give thanks, to remember saints and martyrs. On St. Michael's Day, villagers gather in the churchyard, feasting on what little they can spare. On Easter, flowers decorate the altar, and villagers parade with banners. On All Hallows' Eve, they light candles for the dead, praying for souls trapped in purgatory, and for a brief time, the misery of daily life lifts. Imagine the great harvest feast in autumn. After weeks of toil, villagers gather with bread, ale, roasted meats if fortune allows, and pies stuffed with whatever is left from the fields. Music fills the air, fiddles, drums, flutes carved from bone. Children run barefoot through the mud, chasing one another with laughter. Women dance in circles, skirts twirling, as men clap in rhythm. For a single night, hunger seems far away, but even here, inequality shows. The Lord's table groans with venison, swan, and spices. The peasant's table offers barley, bread, onions, and cabbage. And yet laughter rings, mugs clink, and joy, however thin, takes root. The most shocking to modern eyes is carnival season, days when the village inverts its order. Men dress as women, women as men. The poorest wear mock crowns and parade, as lords of misrule. Jesters mock the reeve, and even the priest might find himself the butt of a playful rhyme. It is rebellion through laughter, sanctioned chaos that reinforces authority by reminding peasants what cannot truly change. Tomorrow the priest will again thunder from the pulpit. The reeve will tally grain. The Lord will demand labor. But for one day, the village laughs at power, and that laughter, brief as it is, nourishes the soul. When the feasting ends, when torches burn low and children huddle close, stories take over. Folklore fills the gaps left by hunger and silence. Agnes tells of fairies that dance in forest clearings, luring the unwary. Thomas recalls tales of headless riders haunting crossroads at midnight. Widow Cooper, before her trial, once told children of herbs blessed by spirits, growing only under moonlight. These stories serve many purposes. They teach children to avoid dark woods. They explain sudden illness or strange fortune. They give shape to fears no priest can soothe, and they create a shared imagination, a world where peasants for a moment feel larger than their suffering. On May Day, The villagers cut down a tall tree and set it upright in the square. Ribbons are tied, music plays, and dancers weave in circles. Bright threads binding around the pole. Alice clutches her ribbon nervously, then laughs as she runs in circles with other children. For once, her hands are not raw from spinning wool. For once, her face glows with joy. Thomas watches, heart heavy but proud. Tomorrow she will be back in the fields. But today she is simply a child, in the darkest days of winter. When food runs low and frost bites, the villagers still gather for Christmas Mass and feast. The Lord provides extra bread, sometimes even meat, as a gesture of charity. The church is decorated with holly, candles glowing against the cold. John sits wide-eyed as carols echo in Latin he does not understand, but the rhythm feels holy. Afterward, he tastes honey cake for the first time, sweet beyond belief. It is one bite of joy in a season of hunger, one memory that will stay with him. But do not mistake these festivals for freedom. Every celebration is tied to the church. Every dance, every feast, every ritual is framed as obedience to God. To skip Mass on a feast day is sin. To celebrate without priestly blessing is rebellion. Even joy is a tool of control. Thomas feels this deeply as he claps to music and drinks weak ale. He knows the priest is watching. Celebration is permitted, but never beyond the church's reach. And yet, joy matters. For peasants who bury children, who labor under reeves, who sleep beside animals on dirt floors, joy is not luxury. It is survival. The laughter of carnival, the taste of roasted meat. The story whispered by firelight. These are sparks that keep despair from consuming all. But morning always comes. The ribbons are untied, the music ends, and peasants return to the fields. Their backs bend once more, their hands blister again. Joy is brief, but necessary, so we ask, can joy truly flourish in a world of hunger and fear? The answer lies in the resilience of peasants. Joy does not erase hardship, but it punctuates it. It reminds them they are more than their suffering. Perhaps that is why songs linger, why folk tales survive, why feast days still shape our calendars today. In a world built on labor and silence, joy was rebellion enough. So let me ask you, would you find joy in a single night of dancing, knowing tomorrow hunger waits? Would you laugh at carnival, knowing the reeve watches? Would you cling to stories of fairies, even if the priest calls them lies? Tell me in the comments, because the peasant's laughter, fleeting though it was, still echoes through time, proof that even in the darkest ages, the human spirit sought light. In the smoky hut, Alice clutches her ribbon from the maypole. John plays with a carved wooden horse, its edges rough, its form simple. For a moment, they look like children anywhere in history, curious, laughing, alive. But in medieval England, childhood is short, play is fleeting, responsibility arrives too soon, and innocence bends beneath hunger and duty. So let us step into their world. Let us ask, what did it mean to grow up in medieval England? The story of childhood begins with survival itself. Many never make it past birth. For every child born in the village, another dies within days or weeks. The midwife prays over every cry, every breath, knowing half will be silenced by fever, infection, or hunger. Parents love their children, of course, they do, but that love is tempered by caution. A baby may be cherished and named, yet a quiet part of the parents. Heart braces for grief, Alice survived her first winters against the odds. John nearly died of fever at 3, his small body saved only by herbs from Widow Cooper. Every day alive is a triumph. Even in hardship, children play. John drags his wooden horse through the dirt. Alice braids straw into dolls. Other children chase chickens, their laughter mixing with clucks and feathers. Their games mirror life, playing house, pretending to plow, mimicking sermons. Childhood imagination blossoms even in mud. But toys are few, carved from scraps of wood or stitched from rags. Still, joy finds a way. A stick becomes a sword. A stone becomes a doll's cradle. Even hunger cannot crush the instinct to play. But childhood ends early. By the age of 7, children are expected to contribute. Girls spin wool, gather water, tend animals, and help prepare meals. Boys scare crows from fields, fetch firewood, and follow their fathers to plough. Both work side by side in the fields when needed, bending backs too young for labour. Alice, at 7, already carries buckets heavier than her arms should bear. John, not much older, drives geese along muddy paths to pasture. Childhood is not protection, it is preparation. Most peasant children never learn to read. Their education is the field, the hearth, the church. They learn when to plant, how to kneel, how to keep silent before the reeve. But for a lucky few, often boys from wealthier families, education beckons. Monasteries and cathedral schools teach Latin, scripture, and basic numbers. A handful of boys may rise to priesthood or clerkship. For girls, education is rarer still. A noble daughter may be taught to read prayers or manage a household, but peasant girls learn skills of survival: spinning, weaving, tending infants, brewing ale. For Alice and John, books are mysteries they will never touch. Their letters are carved into furrows of soil, their numbers measured in seeds and grain. At 12, Robert is nearly old enough to leave. Many boys and girls become apprentices or servants in other households. Boys might learn carpentry, smithing, or trade. Girls may be sent into service as maids, cooks, or wet nurses. This is not opportunity in the modern sense, it is necessity. Families cannot always feed another mouth, and sending children away is survival. Robert dreads the day he must go. He dreams of freedom, yet fears the whip of a master harsher than his father. Childhood is not only short, it is exchanged for labor. For many girls, adolescence brings marriage almost as soon as bodies allow it. By 12 or 14, a girl may be wed often to a man much older. Her childhood ends at the altar, her future bound to childbirth and duty. Alice watches with wide eyes as an older village girl is wed. She does not yet understand the weight of the veil, the finality of the vows. But in a few short years, that will be her fate. To boys too, are pushed early into manhood, expected to labor, fight, or serve before their voices fully deepen. Once a year, the church holds a small feast for children, sweetbreads, apples, sometimes honey. It is both charity and indoctrination, teaching children that joy comes from God's house. John savors a sticky bite of honey bread, his eyes shining. He will remember it for months as hunger gnaws through winter. For peasants, childhood joy is measured not in toys but in tastes, sounds, fleeting moments. At night, children listen to stories by firelight. Tales of saints, of dragons, of fairies in the woods. Stories are not only entertainment, they are lessons. Don't wander at night, or the fairies will take you. Don't lie, or demons will drag you into hell. Work hard, or the reeve will punish your family. For Alice and John, stories are both delight and discipline, shaping their fears and hopes before sleep. And yet, all of this rests on fragile ground. Childhood can end at any moment. A fever, a famine, a fall from a tree, and a life is gone. Alice's friend, Mary, dies at 8 from infection after a cut. The laughter of the maypole feels quieter that year. For John, every cough is a reminder of death's nearness. Childhood is always shadowed by mortality. So what does childhood mean here? It means play in the cracks of labor. It means joy measured in crumbs and ribbons. It means innocence shadowed by fear. Children are not sheltered. They are folded into survival. Their hands blister, their backs bend. Their childhood is exchanged for life's demands. And yet their laughter persists. Their games brighten huts. Their songs echo across fields. They find wonder where adults see only toil. So let me ask you, would you trade your childhood for survival? Could you carry water at 7, marry at 14, bury friends before 15, and still laugh, still play, still dream? Tell me in the comments, because in medieval England, childhood is not protection. It is the first stage of endurance. And every laugh, every toy, every ribbon becomes proof that even in hardship, the human spirit clings to innocence. The rooster crows, the fields glisten with dew. At first glance, life is ordinary. Thomas sharpens his sickle. Agnes kneels to light the fire. Alice and John gather eggs. But beyond the horizon, danger stirs. In medieval England, war and violence are not distant rumors. They are realities that can thunder into a village without warning. Raiders burn, soldiers conscript, rebellions rise and fall, and always it is the peasants who pay the price. Kings feud, nobles quarrel, and England bleeds. When the 100 Years' War erupts against France, lords demand men, money, and grain. Peasants like Thomas are ordered to send sons, brothers, even fathers to march with little more than a spear and patched shoes. Robert watches as village men are gathered. Some go willingly, hungry for coin or glory. Most go in fear, knowing death abroad means starvation at home. The war is fought far away, but its shadow darkens every hut. Taxes rise, grain is seized, fields go untended, and when the men return, if they return, they bring scars, hunger, and sometimes plague for Thomas. War is not banners and trumpets. It is emptier fields, hungrier mouths, quieter nights. But war is not only abroad. Sometimes it arrives on horseback, sudden and merciless. One summer, smoke curls on the horizon. Raiders, perhaps outlaws, perhaps soldiers from a neighboring lord, descend upon the village. They seize livestock, trample crops, set thatched roofs alight. Thomas grabs Alice and John, pulling them behind the hut. Agnes clutches her rosary, praying as shouts fill the air. Their neighbor William runs forward to save his pig. A sword flashes. William falls by dawn. The raiders are gone. The village smolders. The grain is stolen, the animals gone, the dead unburied. This is the reality of medieval life. Survival built over months can be destroyed in a single hour. For villages near Scotland or Wales, raids are constant. Families hide in woods as armed men sweep through, burning, killing, stealing. Children learn to stay quiet, to cling to silence as protection. Alice asks Thomas why men would burn fields they cannot eat. He has no answer. Violence is not always rational. It is power made visible, but peasants do not always bow. Sometimes desperation hardens into rebellion. In 1381, whispers spread, the peasants' revolt. Tired of crushing taxes, tired of Reeve's cruelty, tired of nobles feasting while they starve, villagers across England rise. They march with pitchforks and clubs. They storm manor houses. They burn tax records, symbols of their bondage. For the first time, peasants see the possibility of change. Robert dreams of joining them. His fists clench at the thought of justice. Alice listens wide-eyed as neighbors whisper. Thomas warns them both. Hope is dangerous. In one nearby village, a Reeve tries to enforce a poll tax. Peasants refuse. Shouts turn to blows. The Reeve flees. Villagers cheer. For a day, hope lives. But the Lord returns with soldiers. The ringleaders are hanged. The rest find into deeper poverty. The lesson is clear. Rebellion burns bright, then dies in blood. The peasants' revolt reaches London itself, shaking the throne. For days, peasants taste power, demanding freedom from bondage. But promises made by the young king soon collapse. Leaders like Wat Tyler are killed, and rebellion is crushed. Word spreads to Thomas's village. Some cheer, some weep, most sigh. For a moment, peasants dreamed of freedom, and then the dream turned to ash. Robert's eyes burn with anger, but Thomas grips his shoulder. Better to live bowed than to die proud, he warns. But Robert wonders if survival is enough. Not all violence comes from kings or raiders. Sometimes it grows inside the village itself. Feuds break out over strips of land, over stolen firewood, over whispered insults. A fight in the tavern can end with knives drawn. In a world where justice bends to the lord and priest, violence becomes its own desperate language. For peasants, fear is constant. Fear of war abroad, fear of raiders at dawn, fear of punishment for rebellion, fear even of neighbors with grudges, and yet they live. They rebuild huts after raids, replant fields after war, sing songs even after rebellion is crushed. Survival is not the absence of fear, but the ability to endure it. So what does war teach the peasant? That his life is never truly his own. His labor can be seized for war, his field burned by raiders, his son conscripted, his hope crushed by rebellion. And yet some dared. Some marched to London demanding freedom. Some lifted pitchforks against knights. Some chose death over silence. So let me ask you, would you dare? Would you rise with pitchfork in hand, knowing the cost could be your life? Or would you keep your head low, bowing to survive another day? Tell me in the comments, would you survive war by hiding? Would you fight back and risk the noose? Would you join rebellion or stay silent? Because medieval survival is not only about hunger and toil. It is about courage, fear, and choices no one should ever have to make. The fire in Thomas's hearth has burned low. The ribbon Alice once twirled lies frayed. John's wooden horse is worn smooth from years of small hands. Their village may vanish into time, their names forgotten, but their world, the world of medieval England, has never truly left us. So let us take one final walk, not through smoky huts or muddy fields, but through the echoes of the Middle Ages that still shape our lives today. Every feast we saw, Easter, Christmas, All Hallows, remains on our calendars. Their roots stretch deep into medieval soil. The rhythm of work and worship they followed still shapes our weeks. 7 days, with Sunday marked as sacred. Even our holidays, our festivals of food and family, are descendants of medieval holy days. When you unwrap gifts at Christmas, when you feast on Easter Sunday, you are walking in the footsteps of Thomas and Agnes, bowing to the same calendar. Think of their barley bread, their weak ale. Today we eat richer, drink safer, but the staples remain. Bread is still a symbol of survival. To earn your bread is to live. Ale and beer still bind communities, now in pubs rather than smoky huts. Food has changed. Yes, but the language of survival has not. The church that tolled bells over Thomas's village still stands in stone across England. Its towers pierce the sky, its calendars mark time, its rituals echo through centuries. Even those who no longer kneel live in a world the church once defined. Our law, our morality, our ideas of sin and virtue. The Middle Ages gave us more than superstition. They gave us a framework of meaning that still lingers, even in secular lives. Remember the Reeves glare, the Lord's judgment, the priest's sermons. Their authority trained peasants to bow, to obey. That same need for order shaped the growth of courts, of governments, of hierarchies that govern us today. The language of justice, the structure of law, even the bureaucracy of taxes, all are medieval legacies. When you file papers, pay fines, or sit in court, you stand in the shadow of manorial halls and church courts. Widow Cooper's fate reminds us of knowledge suppressed. Yet folk remedies live on. Herbs once whispered about in fear, willow bark, honey, nettles, are now recognized by science. The wisdom of peasants, carried in secret, became medicine. At the same time, monasteries preserved books, scripts, and learning through centuries of chaos. Much was lost, yes, but without them, more might have vanished. The balance of what was preserved and what was destroyed defines our inheritance. Every story told by firelight still breathes today. Fairies in the woods, headless riders at crossroads, omens in storms. They linger in our fairy tales, our ghost stories, our novels and films. The villagers' whispered fears became the folklore we still tell our children. Their myths never died, they transformed. But the greatest legacy is not the church or law or food. It is the resilience of ordinary people. Think of Thomas and Agnes, hungry, bowed, fearful, and yet still praying, still laughing, still dancing at the maypole. Think of Alice clutching her ribbon, John playing with his horse. Think of Widow Cooper, tending the sick despite the risk. Their endurance is why we are here. Our ancestors forgotten by history, buried in unmarked graves, are the reason we live. Their silence was survival. Their laughter was defiance. Their resilience is our inheritance. Picture a plough uncovering a skull in a field. The farmer sets it aside, shrugs, and keeps working. That skull belonged to someone who once prayed, danced, sang, feared, loved, forgotten, and yet, through us, remembered. Our world is built on their bones. Their lives are in our blood. The huts may be gone, but their struggles remain. We work long hours. We bow to systems larger than ourselves. We bury loved ones and still seek comfort in ritual, faith, or story. The Middle Ages are not a distant world. They are a mirror. Strip away our lights and machines, and we are Thomas and Agnes again, clinging to survival, whispering prayers, seeking joy in the cracks of hardship. So, I ask you, what part of you is still medieval? Is it your hunger for meaning in ritual? Your fear of authority, your laughter in the face of hardship, your prayers when sickness strikes. The Middle Ages live in us, not just in books or ruins. They shape how we work, worship, fear, and hope. If this journey through medieval England stirred you, if you saw yourself in Thomas, Agnes, Alice, John, or even Widow Cooper, then join us again. Subscribe for more stories that make history breathe. Comment below. What medieval struggle do you think you would have endured best, and which would have broken you? And share this with someone who believes the Middle Ages were only knights and castles. Show them the truth, that survival was not found in armor or banners, but in the huts, the hearths, the fields, the silent resilience of people whose names history forgot because they were survivors, and their legacy lives in you.